The main character of the story was a commoner mage in his previous life. In this world, commoners cannot use magic proficiently. Despite the protagonist's tremendous efforts, he achieved no results. Meanwhile, the nobles were fortunately blessed with the ability to wield magic powerfully. Before ending the protagonist's life, a nobleman allowed him to demonstrate magic one last time, and when he saw that the boy could only create a tiny flame, he mocked him for his incompetence. Incidentally, he told him about the teaching of William, the father of magic, that those not blessed by heaven with noble bloodlines or talent could never progress, no matter how hard they tried. After those words, he created a massive flame that completely incinerated the protagonist. Although he had logged out of that world, the protagonist had to admit that the noble's magic was truly amazing, and he wished he could learn more to master such spells. Fortunately, the gods answered this wish, and he was reincarnated as a prince named Lloyd. When he opened his eyes, Lloyd thought the maids around him were giants, so he immediately used fire magic to attack them, creating a huge hole in the room. Witnessing Lloyd's terrible power, the maids could only gape in astonishment. Meanwhile, the citizens of the kingdom of Salem received news about the birth of the seventh prince. 10 years later, the kingdom of Salem had changed dramatically from the past, and Lloyd had become a prince who always liked to run away from his maids. It turned out that Lloyd only wanted to research magic, but they wanted him to learn hunting. Whenever he met people in the palace, Lloyd always asked them to keep his location secret from the maids. Seeing Lloyd constantly running away, the ministers could only sigh helplessly, unable to counsel him. According to them, Lloyd was much younger than the other princes, so he would not have the right to succeed to the throne. But since birth, Lloyd had been fluent in language and could read magic books. So many people believed he was the reincarnation of William, the father of magic. In reality, Lloyd's previous life was as a commoner of the kingdom, and although he had been reincarnated as the seventh prince, he still retained his memories. Now Lloyd was a figure of considerable stature with social standing, respected by the people. However, he maintained his previous life's stance of deeply researching magic. Therefore, Lloyd only cared about the library room full of magic books. Whenever he went to the library, Lloyd always showed extreme excitement, but the maid Shifa had found him, so this time he couldn't escape. Immediately afterward, Lloyd was dragged outside by Shifa to practice swordsmanship as usual. Lloyd believed that since he wasn't in line for succession, he didn't need to learn swordsmanship. But Shifa always maintained that as royalty, one must master swordsmanship first. Moreover, Shifa had taught him swordsmanship for 3 years, so she considered this work her life's purpose. Knowing he couldn't escape Shifa, Lloyd had to practice more diligently to quickly return to reading books. And right after that, the two continued to wield wooden swords and charge at each other. While fighting, Lloyd noticed that Shifa was always holding back with him. On the other hand, Lloyd also possessed a spell that could mimic Shifa's movements, so this time he would cheat by exactly copying her actions. But Shifa had advantages in physical strength, power, and height, causing Lloyd to be continuously pushed back. To overcome this, Lloyd used a growth spell to enlarge his sword and muscles. Additionally, this spell made Lloyd float in the air, so now their heights were equal. This way, Lloyd compensated for all the disparities with Shifa, making the battle very evenly matched. Following that, Lloyd moved just like Shifa while unleashing identical sword techniques. After some combat, Lloyd thought Shifa had been drawn into his fighting style, so he decided to stop the copying spell to launch a surprise attack. But Shifa blocked Lloyd's strike and then tapped him with her sword for the offense of cheating. It turned out that Shifa had seen through Lloyd's tricks like floating in the air and increasing his sword size, and she was driven wild by Lloyd's ability to activate 2 spells simultaneously. But in fact, Lloyd could activate 4 spells at once. Luckily, Shifa hadn't discovered that yet. Right after practice, Lloyd was dragged into the bathroom by Shifa along with other maids. There, he heard a story about a demon sealed in a forbidden book beneath the castle. That night, Lloyd sneaked into the castle to explore what interesting things might be there. First, Lloyd used a wind-based invisibility spell to bypass the guards. This was a cloaking spell that controlled airflow and reflected light, so even if Lloyd stood right in front of someone, no one could see him. When he heard them mention that there was a very powerful demon there, Lloyd felt extremely excited. According to the guards, the entrance had an extremely powerful barrier erected by 10 mages. Yet Lloyd only took a few seconds to break that mediocre seal. Although he had lived in the palace for 10 years, Lloyd had only now discovered this mysterious library. For Lloyd, this place was nothing short of paradise for a kid who loved to research magic like him. Lloyd had just sat down to open a book when another book unexpectedly flew up high. From within the book, a very mischievous laugh from the demon Grima echoed. It thanked Lloyd for breaking the seal on the door earlier, and now Grima demanded that Lloyd break another seal in the book to let it escape. To thank Lloyd, the forbidden book demon promised to give him lots of gold and silver. But Lloyd knew full well that Grima had used a spell to turn stone into gold to deceive him. So this deceitful demon needed to be locked up permanently and couldn't be allowed to roam free. At this point, Grima was very frightened, so it promised Lloyd it wouldn't do evil, and it could also show Lloyd ancient spells he had never known before. Upon hearing this, the young Lloyd was as happy as if it were a festival, and had to ask if it was true. Grima was also very pleased because it had successfully persuaded Lloyd to open the seal. After that, Lloyd performed a key-shaped spell that made the seal explode, and as soon as the demon escaped, it demonstrated ancient magic to Lloyd by attacking him. First was a technique called Dark Blast Cannon, creating a dark explosion that engulfed Lloyd. Then the space around the room violently shook. Grima thought Lloyd had evaporated after this move, but he had created a spherical barrier to protect himself. He even praised the Dark Blast Cannon as a very powerful technique and wanted to learn more about it. Hearing this, Grima was very frustrated, so it frantically threw Dark Blast Cannons at Lloyd. But Grima threw until its arms were tired without being able to penetrate his barrier. Meanwhile, Lloyd observed how to cast the Dark Blast Cannon while learning how to create it. He even stuck a finger outside the barrier to test if the damage from this technique was strong or not. Seeing the rotating spell on Lloyd's hand for the first time, he was both in pain and unable to hide his excitement, so he asked Grima to unleash its strongest Dark Blast Cannon to see if there was anything special. Out of anger, Grima split its muzzle in two to combine incantations, then fired a Dark Blast Cannon in a spiral shape toward Lloyd's barrier. This time, Lloyd gained new knowledge about how two-headed demons combine incantations. While the demon was drenched in sweat without having broken through his barrier, it realized that casting techniques from earlier until now was just for Lloyd to learn, having no effect at all, so Grima felt very ashamed and tried to escape from the room. But Lloyd had created another barrier underground, preventing the demon from escaping. Lloyd explained that previously he often cast magic recklessly, causing destruction, so creating strong barriers was to prevent such situations, and after learning attack magic, he wanted to know if Grima had any defensive spells. So Lloyd cast a technique called Flame Sphere to roast the demon inside the barrier. Thinking the demon might have other interesting spells, it instead lay face down with smoke coming from its mouth. So now Grima wouldn't dare disrespect Lloyd, even if paid to do so. Right after that, Lloyd restored the room to its original state, making the demon gape in amazement. And having seen Lloyd's terrifying power, it now called him master. Grima also had to admit that Lloyd's fire spell was truly painful. Hearing this, Lloyd wanted to try increasing his magic a bit to see if the demon could withstand it. Thinking Lloyd wanted to slaughter it, Grima had to kneel down and surrender, promising never to disobey him again. Grima even trembled, asking Lloyd's permission to become his pet. Lloyd immediately agreed and wanted the demon to reduce its size to avoid attracting attention. So Grima transformed into a spiritual beast that looked quite mischievous. Although it had accepted becoming a pet, this demon was still very scheming, demanding to take over Lloyd's mind when he wasn't paying attention. Only upon seeing Lloyd's terrifying magical power did it abandon that intention completely. And from now on, it wanted Lloyd to call it by a new name, Cremo. Lloyd had a very talented older brother, the second Prince Amber, and today Amber had prepared very neat attire and was preparing to visit Lloyd's room. At this time, Lloyd was engrossed in researching magic books when he detected someone approaching. So he quickly reminded Cremo to hide to avoid being discovered, while Amber had nearly reached Lloyd and invited him to practice magic together. The two then went to the training area within the royal palace, and the second prince Amber demonstrated his ability to cast precise magic, making the servant girls very impressed. Lloyd also knew that Amber was such an excellent prince that he was rumored to be the successor, and occasionally, Amber came to invite Lloyd to practice magic for fun. Lloyd didn't care about competing for the throne, so he was quite close with Amber. Moreover, Lloyd only wanted freedom to research magic. When it was Lloyd's turn, he decided to play harder than usual, unleashing a fireball that could bend its trajectory but still hit the target. Not just once, but Lloyd demonstrated many more times with different targets. And although Lloyd hit every magical shot, the ministers didn't acknowledge his talent. As for Lloyd, he didn't bother with their casual slander, as he only needed to satisfy his passion for magic. Amber understood this, so he said goodbye to Lloyd to rest first. Lloyd was very happy about this because now he could freely practice magical techniques. First, Lloyd wanted to try Grima's dual incantation ability from before, but Grima immediately stopped him because he only had one mouth. Lloyd responded by telling Grima to go into his hand to become his second mouth. So Grima was at a loss for words, not expecting Lloyd to play such a strange trick. After that, Lloyd asked Grima to help him cast a fireball. But while Grima was reciting the incantation, Lloyd also mumbled along. As a result, Grima experienced magical overload and couldn't cast the spell. It turned out that Lloyd had recited 100 incantations continuously to test activating them simultaneously. So Grima was very frustrated and called Lloyd a madman because no one in the world could do such a thing. After some calculation, Lloyd decided to control Grima's mouth directly. So now whatever he said, it had to repeat without being able to argue. Right after that, Lloyd incanted 2 high-level fire and water spells, making Grima's mouth tired. Lloyd even interwove the 2 spells together, combined with the large amount of magical power in his body. Moreover, this was a dual incantation, so Grima thought this time Lloyd might flatten the kingdom. But in the end, Lloyd cast this technique into the sky, giving the entire kingdom a scare. Meanwhile, Amber's sycophants were wondering why he paid attention to Lloyd, so Amber had to explain everything to them. Earlier, Lloyd's magic had grazed all the targets, proving that he was very good at magic and could become a great sage in the future. Therefore, Amber very much wanted Lloyd to help when he became king. Suddenly, everyone noticed that outside it had become dark, although it was currently daytime, and Grima was extremely panicked because Lloyd's spell had blown away the sky, turning day into night. Even Lloyd was very scared and tried to find a way to return the sky to normal. And when the sky returned to daytime, Grima was amazed at Lloyd's power. Although just Lloyd's pet, Grima always had to take care of him when he woke up. Sometimes Grima was quite angry, but then thought about eventually taking over Lloyd's body, so it endured to continue working as a servant. Today, Grima read a news article about the huge hole in the sky caused by Lloyd. However, Lloyd only cared about news of brave adventurers. They had conquered many dungeons to bring back gold, jewels, and high-level magical items, so Lloyd decided to travel to a dungeon to explore what was interesting. Lloyd knew if he left the palace, everyone would make a fuss, so he took out a seed and cast a wood element spell. The seed grew into an exact replica of Lloyd in appearance. But now Lloyd had to think of a way to escape the maid Shifa, because Shifa paid such close attention to Lloyd that she would notice even if he grew just a few millimeters. After some calculation, Lloyd immediately set out to escape the palace with Grima. Meanwhile, the puppet created by Lloyd was impersonating him so the servants wouldn't suspect anything. But actually, Lloyd had separated Grima's soul and put it into the puppet, while Grima's body had crawled into Lloyd's palm to become his second mouth. With this method, Lloyd could communicate with Grima at home to know the situation. At this time, the maids were very happy watching Lloyd groom himself, while Grima suddenly realized that since Lloyd wasn't home, it could wreak havoc in the entire palace without anyone stopping it. But when it heard Lloyd say Grima was a kind-hearted spirit beast, it was very embarrassed and immediately stopped that thought. Lloyd had left the palace for quite some time without finding a dungeon, and he suddenly noticed below a group of monsters chasing a girl. Lloyd thought the girl would be killed, but she surprisingly turned back to fight them. With just one punch, she directly eliminated the first one, and the ones after only needed one kick to send their heads flying. For the last one, she performed a very powerful skill that made it completely disappear. Observing from afar, Lloyd realized the girl was a martial artist. He had read books before, so he knew that martial artists used a type of energy called Kai. Whenever they performed skills, Kai would escape and cause massive damage. Lloyd himself wanted to learn many things from the girl, but he was a prince, so he couldn't reveal his identity, and the girl had quickly spotted Lloyd hiding on the mountain. Thinking Lloyd had bad intentions, she rushed up there to teach him a lesson. But when she saw Lloyd's new appearance, the girl went crazy because he was too handsome. It turned out that Lloyd had used magic to combine his appearance with Amber's to create a completely new look. At first, Lloyd introduced himself as just a novice adventurer, while the girl introduced herself as a B-rank adventurer named Tuan. Only because Lloyd was too handsome had she been admiring him from earlier without daring to turn back. Tuan herself had been lonely for 18 years because men didn't like strong women like her. So this time, Tuan was determined to make Lloyd her lover. And when Lloyd invited her to conquer a dungeon, Tuan immediately agreed. As soon as they entered the dungeon, Tuan punched all the monsters to demonstrate her skills to Lloyd. But the young man only cared about the glowing stones, making Tuan speechless. After some conversation, Lloyd learned that Tuan still had no teammates going with her, and he was somewhat curious about her Kai attacks. Seeing Lloyd interested in her strength, Tuan spilled everything to him. This included how to sense Kai and how a martial artist practices Kai. Tuan even suggested that Lloyd absorb her Kai through the mouth to feel it. However, Lloyd had already started practicing Kai according to Tuan's instructions, and when she saw Lloyd looking uncomfortable, Tuan felt very worried because if one wasn't accustomed to Kai, their lungs would burn painfully. But after some practice, Lloyd had successfully activated the Kai in his body, and he was very excited, believing this power could be utilized to transform into magic. Seeing Lloyd so interested in Kai, Tuan promised to teach him more, and when Lloyd happily agreed, Tuan couldn't hide her joy. Meanwhile, Grima was still comfortably impersonating Lloyd to enjoy royal life. But later Shifa arrived to invite the prince to practice swords, and as soon as it saw Shifa, Grima thought it was really over. Tuan had defeated the final boss of the dungeon to get the treasure chest, but she thought this low-level dungeon meant the reward wouldn't be valuable. Lloyd, however, was very excited because this was the first time he had seen a dungeon chest. Seeing that Lloyd had mastered Kai, Tuan was very happy, and she even wanted to go home to tell her father to prepare for the wedding. But first, she had to open this chest with Lloyd. At that moment, a blade suddenly shot out from the chest, so Lloyd had to embrace Tuan to save her. And from beneath the chest appeared a lick monster made entirely of bones, and Lloyd realized that this was the true final boss of the dungeon. Tuan showed clear panic when she saw the demon appear, but she still pretended to be fine, telling Lloyd not to worry. After those words, Tuan unleashed a palm strike that pushed Lloyd toward the dungeon door, helping him escape. Right after that, the lick created glass panels to attack Tuan, forcing her to continuously dodge, and Tuan had to use a lot of energy just to break one of his glass panels. It turned out that lick monsters were only meant for adventurers of rank A or above, and it was unclear why it appeared in such a low-level dungeon. Therefore, Tuan had to find a way to buy time for Lloyd to escape the dungeon. At this time, Lloyd was still in mid-air after being hit by Tuan's Kai attack. Because he wanted to return to learn more from Tuan, he created a barrier around himself, causing two monsters that were watching to get hit. Lloyd noticed that Grima had lost connection and wasn't saying anything at all. In reality, Grima was being tormented by Shifa at home, so it was continuously calling Lloyd for help in vain. While inside the dungeon, Tuan was about to collapse before the lick. Just as she was about to flee, the lick suddenly spoke. It believed that Tuan's Kai attacks were too weak compared to magic. In the past, the lick had eaten many sages who wandered into this dungeon, but Tuan wasn't worthy of becoming his food, while Lloyd had been able to react in time to dodge his previous fatal attack. Hearing this, Tuan reminded the lick about Lloyd's true nature. Indeed, in her homeland, Kai wasn't anything powerful compared to magic, but Lloyd had praised Kai as amazing, which made Tuan happy inside. So Tuan immediately used her Kai to rush up and beat the lick to a pulp. Tuan unleashed all the attacks she had practiced for so long to destroy the lick's barrier. At the same time, she let him know that she had practiced so much that she didn't even have time to find a boyfriend. Finally, Tuan unleashed a technique called Void Heart Bullet, breaking through his protective barrier. But after using that technique, Tuan was exhausted and couldn't stand anymore. The lick saw that Tuan was a pitiful person who had to use all her Kai just to break his barrier. This proved that all her training efforts until now were just meaningless, and after those words, he launched an attack to finish Tuan. However, Lloyd arrived just in time to use a barrier to protect Tuan, amazing her, and now he would punish this lick for daring to mock her efforts. Seeing the lick begin to chant, Lloyd immediately used Kai to circle behind him, and Lloyd's terrifying speed made the lick unable to understand what technique that was. Meanwhile, Lloyd continued breathing to launch the next attack. But he suddenly wondered if he could combine Kai with magic, and Lloyd found this possibility entirely feasible because Tuan had said just focusing on breathing would make everything possible. Right after that, Lloyd breathed very deeply to gather as much air as possible into his lungs, even breathing in so much that there was no more air left in the barrier. Outside, the lick was continuously attacking to destroy Lloyd's barrier. But because Lloyd needed more air, he broke his own barrier for speed. As soon as he saw Lloyd come out, the lick frantically launched techniques toward him. Below, Tuan was very worried, fearing that Lloyd would be hit by the lick's techniques. However, Lloyd utilized Kai to move extremely fast, making it impossible for the lick to hit him. And after absorbing enough air, Lloyd blended it with the magical power in his body, while needing some time to create a completely new technique, then used it to cut through all of the lick's attacks. Lloyd continuously improved his technique to make it thinner and faster. He could even launch techniques toward the lick continuously without needing to chant. After exchanging techniques for a while, the lick realized that Kai was more powerful than his magic. With such fast casting speed, the lick couldn't defend anymore. Below, Tuan was eagerly waiting for Lloyd's performance, so he launched a decisive attack to cut the lick in half along with his barrier, and Lloyd returned to Tuan with a victorious smile. Together, they opened the reward chest and found a dull knife. But Lloyd believed this knife might contain mysterious magic, so he asked Tuan to give it to him. And after defeating the final boss, the dungeon gradually collapsed, with Lloyd believing that this chest had absorbed many treasures, so he tried to take it with him as they left. While Tuan was fearfully panicking, Lloyd managed to lift the chest lid, after which the dungeon was completely swallowed, leaving no trace. Lloyd realized that the chest would store power underground until it became a new dungeon again. Tuan wondered if it was because the lick had insulted her that he used Kai to defeat him, but Lloyd only replied that Kai was truly very interesting. After that, he said goodbye to Tuan to fly back to the palace, and before parting, Tuan promised that she would practice diligently to become an interesting girl in his eyes. But Tuan completely forgot to ask for Lloyd's contact information. Just as Lloyd arrived at the palace, he discovered that his pet Grima had been tormented to exhaustion. It turned out that Shifa had dragged Grima to practice swordsmanship, but the little one didn't know anything about sword techniques. Thinking the prince had declined in skill, Shifa had to teach very strictly, and now Grima was lying there crying and blaming Lloyd for coming home too late. At the dungeon, Lloyd had collected many glowing stones along with the chest lid, but it turned out they were all useless items that couldn't be used. Only the dull knife seemed useful, so Lloyd would investigate it further. First, Lloyd soaked the knife in hot water, then smoothed its surface, and he successfully separated a layer of liquid called magic marrow fluid, which had the effect of enhancing weapons. Then Lloyd separated all the fluid into test tubes and shook them thoroughly. Lloyd understood that this marrow fluid was very rare and couldn't be wasted, so he used water magic to carefully separate it. As a result, Lloyd obtained the formula for creating marrow fluid, silver oil and magic powder. Lloyd could easily find oil and silver, but for magic powder, he would make it from the dungeon chest lid. Thus began Lloyd's journey to produce weapon-enhancing marrow fluid. A while later, he went to meet the king to ask for a bag of silver. Actually, the king could have given him a bag of gold, but Lloyd only needed silver. So the king happily praised him for being so young, yet already knowing how to save. But he didn't know that Lloyd had dumped all that silver into a pot to melt it. Next, he went to Shifa to practice swordsmanship with her, and Shifa had promised Lloyd that if he could win even one move, she would give him a bottle of oil. Although Lloyd used additional magic combined with swordsmanship, he couldn't keep up with Shifa's movements, and finally, Lloyd was defeated by her without landing a single hit. However, Shifa still gave Lloyd a bottle of oil because she was very happy today. It turned out that Shifa thought Lloyd had declined a lot in skill the previous day, but seeing him improve so much today made her cry tears of joy. Shifa also saw that Lloyd was only 10 years old, but could already combine both swordsmanship and magic, so she thought that someday he would become the leader of the kingdom's Knight Order. But Lloyd didn't have time to boast anymore, so he said goodbye to Shifa to go concoct his formula. This time, Lloyd had gathered all the ingredients and together with Grima, they dumped everything into the heating pot, and both successfully created the enhancement marrow fluid. Afterward, he went to Amber's room to ask his brother for a large quantity of weapons to experiment on, because Lloyd knew that Amber had many royal guards following him. Seeing this, the guards thought that Lloyd was taking their weapons to use as toys, but with Prince Amber's word, they obediently handed over all the weapons to Lloyd. Because these were newly distributed swords, everyone was afraid that Lloyd would damage them. Grima heard them bad-mouthing Lloyd from outside and was quite upset, so it had to join Lloyd in creating a bunch of enhanced weapons to make them open their eyes in amazement. With the marrow fluid he had created, Lloyd frantically carved it onto the swords, even carving some additional spells that caused the first sword to break into pieces because it couldn't withstand the magic. Grima said that failure is the mother of success, so they both continued to experiment with all the remaining swords. Despite quite a few failures, Lloyd successfully created a large number of enhanced swords. As a result, out of the initial 120 swords, 50 remained after the experiment. Actually, Lloyd had successfully created 80 swords, but he liked adding more ingredients, which led to failures. Amber saw that Lloyd's talent had surpassed many mages in the kingdom, even exceeding his expectations. Yet the royal guards claimed that Lloyd was just boasting and couldn't possibly succeed. But when one guard sheathed his sword, the scabbard was cut in half, making Grima very satisfied, while the sword for Prince Amber was very carefully enhanced by Lloyd, and he hoped to witness its power in actual combat. So Amber invited Lloyd to go hunt in the forest to test it immediately. At the crack of dawn the next day, when the dogs hadn't yet awakened, and the newspaper seller had just set up his stall, Lloyd's team had already set out to slay monsters. This time, not only Prince Amber, but also Shifa accompanied Lloyd outside the city. And while the people were busy harvesting rice early in the morning, Lloyd's team headed toward the forest ahead, as it was the territory of many ferocious monsters. Although this forest was quite dangerous, Lloyd felt very excited on his first visit there. And now he wanted to know how powerful the enhanced swords would be. Prince Amber noticed that Shifa was always sticking close to Lloyd, not half a step away, so he teased Shifa, asking if she had some special feelings for Lloyd. Suddenly, Shifa drew her sword, frightening the prince, but actually, she had sensed a pack of kobo wolves around them. Even Lloyd had spotted the wolves since entering the forest, but he pretended not to notice. It turned out that Tuan had previously taught Lloyd how to sense Kai, so he could see all presences around him. Thanks to the swords enhanced by Lloyd, each monster was cut in half. They were so sharp that they could even cut through iron and steel, and the soldiers using them were stunned as if it was their first time using high-quality swords. Amber also showed great pride in Lloyd for having such an excellent brother. And although Shifa's sword hadn't been enhanced, she had eliminated a mountain of monsters. When one rushed toward Lloyd, Tuan suddenly appeared and kicked its muzzle away. When he first saw Tuan, Lloyd had to pretend not to know her. But Tuan came closer to Lloyd because his face looked very familiar, and moreover, Lloyd was also using Kai, so he feared that this time his identity would be revealed. And when she saw someone being intimate with the prince, Shifa became jealously furious with Tuan. Tuan was equally stubborn, so the two girls nearly fought each other. Fortunately, Prince Amber stopped them in time. That evening, the group camped to rest by the lake in the forest, and when Prince Amber came to get acquainted, Tuan was extremely delighted. At this time, Tuan noticed that Amber had a face very similar to the person who had accompanied her before, while that person's Kai was very similar to Lloyd's. Afraid of being discovered by Tuan, Lloyd was trying to avoid her. Just as he was about to enter the tent to sleep soundly, Lloyd encountered Shifa, who was already inside. It turned out that tonight Shifa demanded to sleep with Lloyd to protect him, while Tuan, who was following Lloyd's Kai, nearly got hit by Shifa's flying dagger. So the two girls dragged each other outside and quarreled loudly. Taking advantage of the chaos, Lloyd ran over to Amber to chat with him. And Amber had to admit that Lloyd was a lucky boy to have two girls fighting over him. Even Grima agreed that Lloyd was very attractive to the girls around him. But Prince Amber reminded Lloyd to be careful because women are scary when jealous. Indeed, the two girls, angry at the situation, had knocked out all the guards. Tuan said that today she had received a mission to repair a temple, and hearing this, Shifa wanted to drive Tuan away for convenience. But Amber wanted to ask Tuan to stay on guard because she could detect Kai around them. At that moment, a giant wolf called the bear wolf appeared, so everyone no longer needed to stand guard. After that, the wolf jumped in front of the guards, making them extremely frightened, while Shifa told Lloyd to hide behind her so she could slaughter this wolf. While everyone was busy fighting the wolf, Grima realized that the ruined temple in the distance had something very strange about it. Tuan had unleashed a very powerful Kai attack that sent the wolf flying several meters. But that wasn't enough to defeat the wolf, so Prince Amber came to assist. Amber used the enhanced sword to increase his magical power, then unleashed a flame sphere technique toward the wolf, impressing everyone. And after being hit by this technique, The wolf was officially roasted, and Amber thanked Lloyd, saying that thanks to the sword tempered by him, his magic had become much stronger. At this point, Grima remembered that the ruined temple in the distance had a demon seal, and the wolf that had seemingly died was revived by a dark magical force. It even called many more companions, amazing everyone. From the wolf's mouth emerged a demon who called himself Basiru. He said that humans had previously harmed his family, so Basiru ordered the monsters to rush in and destroy all the humans here. Although Amber and Tuan fought non-stop, the monsters recovered immediately, and Amber believed that the recovery power must come from the demon Basiru. Grima was also acquainted with Basiru, so it was not unfamiliar with his power. This demon could change the nature of magic to control the bear wolves, making them think Basiru was their mother. So if they didn't eliminate Basiru, the situation would be very dangerous. But Lloyd wanted Grima to teach him how to change the nature of magic rather than fighting. Over here, Tuan was very frustrated because Shifa just stood watching without helping, while Basiru laughed like a madman, thinking that humans were all weak. He even mocked that Shifa and Lloyd were probably so scared that they had wet themselves. Hearing the demon say this, Shifa became furious and asked Lloyd's permission to go over there and teach the demon a lesson. First, Shifa called Basiru's family filthy, stinking, reeking garbage. They had made Prince Lloyd smell this odor, so she couldn't forgive them. After those words, Shifa lightly pushed her sword out, ready to cut down any monster. Seeing this, Basiru laughed at Shifa, saying that no matter how much she cut, the bear wolves would not die, because he would continuously transmit recovery magic, making the bear wolves immortal. But Shifa also laughed in Basiru's face, saying that those with foul mouths shouldn't talk too much. Hearing this, the demon was very upset and rushed in to take Shifa's life. However, she used her speed to cut off the wolf's limbs, making him bewildered. Although Basiru could recover immediately, it meant that the other monsters would move more slowly. This proved that Basiru was focusing his magic on the bear wolf's body he was hiding in. Amber recognized this and asked Shifa to cause as much damage as possible to Basiru to help everyone regroup. Over here, Grima was still engrossed in explaining the technique of changing the nature of magical power to Lloyd. Because this technique was very difficult, even Basiru himself took a long time to learn it. But for Lloyd, it only took a few minutes for him to master this technique, and Lloyd could even create a very fragrant flower, amazing Grima. Meanwhile, Basiru was being tormented by Shifa, and when she found that a normal sword wasn't satisfying enough, Shifa borrowed an enhanced sword to see how it worked. As soon as she saw the sword with Lloyd's magical engravings, Shifa was so happy she cried. Basiru, seeing how important Lloyd was to Shifa, threatened to cut him into many pieces. But actually, Basiru played a distraction card and suddenly rushed to bite Shifa. Basiru thought Shifa was done for, but she was still in front of him, scaring him to death. And Shifa used another enhanced sword to cut the wolf into the air. Under the moonlight, Shifa switched to dual swords and performed all kinds of masterful techniques from her clan, starting with the twin dragons ascending to heaven and followed by the flying bird descending to earth. Those were all extremely precise techniques that Basiru couldn't defend against. Then she rushed in close to Basiru, continuing to unleash sword strikes that knocked him out of the bear wolf's body. And finally, Shifa made him land with her final technique. Although Shifa's fighting was a bit revealing, everyone had to admit that she was extremely cool. Over here, Lloyd had successfully mimicked Shifa's posture using the technique of changing magical power, while Shifa had gone to Basiru and forced him to lick Lloyd's sword for daring to touch the prince. Although completely dominated by Shifa, Basiru still refused to surrender, and he breathed out a dark miasma that made Shifa worry. Meanwhile, Amber and Tuan had successfully subdued the remaining monsters. However, Prince Amber and the soldiers had inhaled Basiru's miasma, causing them to faint on the spot, and even Shifa was affected, leaving her with no strength. Basiru was extremely frustrated after being beaten by Shifa until now, so he grew wings all over his body and unleashed a powerful punch that sent Shifa flying toward the lake. Although Amber had awakened, he was helpless to assist Shifa. It seemed the putrid smell was too overwhelming for Amber to stand up. As for Shifa, after taking that punch, she still wasn't afraid of Basiru and continued to mock his terribly foul mouth. Hearing this, Basiru was very angry and intended to finish Shifa off, but Tuan blocked his kick. Now Basiru had another opponent, the girl who used Kai. Although Shifa was very tired, she still had to pretend she was fine and didn't need Tuan's help. After those words, Shifa collapsed because earlier she had been too close to the miasma Bazuru had exhaled. He said that anyone who inhaled the miasma would be completely controlled. Yet Tuan was still lucid, so he had to see what her secret was. Although Tuan quickly launched a kick, he dodged very fast and grabbed her leg. Now Bazuru knew that Tuan had adjusted her breathing to counter the miasma. Seeing Bazuru stick out his tongue, which looked terrifying, Tuan punched him in the mouth, then unleashed a technique called Thunder Suppression Break that sent him flying into the lake. Tuan intended to take this opportunity to adjust her breathing, but a monster controlled by Bazuru caught her. Bazuru proclaimed that his clan was full of handsome men, so he tried to entice Tuan to join. He then used the miasma to control Tuan and had the monster swallow her. After defeating all his opponents, Bazuru prattled on about how he had killed the parents of the bear-wolf pack and used miasma to control them. So Lloyd had to admit that Bazuru was truly a very cruel character. Just as he heard Lloyd's voice, he was startled that someone was still conscious in the miasma, and accompanying him was a demon with a very stupid-looking shape. Grima, upon first hearing someone call it stupid, was quite upset, and being a fellow demon, Grima wanted to advise Bazuru, but then thought that he was beyond help. Meanwhile, Bazuru had directed the bear wolves to attack Lloyd, and Lloyd saw this as an opportunity to test changing the nature of magical power. He created an entire garden of flowers, making the bear wolf pack think they were seeing their parents. Soon, the bear wolves were completely enchanted by Lloyd, to Bazuru's astonishment. Then Lloyd also told the bear wolf that swallowed Tuan to release her. Bazuru immediately released miasma to continue controlling the bear wolves, but the bear wolves all rushed to attack Bazuru because he had killed their parents. Seeing how the wolf pack attacked in coordinated formation, Lloyd was very impressed. After being continuously bitten, Bazuru went into a frenzy, rising up and beating the bear wolves mercilessly. After that, Bazuru turned to boast loudly to Lloyd that his magic had no effect on demonic species like him. Hearing this, Lloyd recalled that Grima had said exactly the same thing before, so this time he would unleash some power to let Bazuru taste that feeling. Previously, Grima had also wondered why its magic didn't work on Lloyd. The truth was that all demon skills were too small compared to the enormous magical power within him. Or more accurately, Bazuru was just an experimental subject for Lloyd to freely use his techniques. Now Bazuru realized that Lloyd was the real demon. He had created many barriers to capture Bazuru, not letting him escape. Bazuru also understood that Lloyd was trying to catch him, so he had to run away quickly from here. However, Lloyd's casting speed was too fast, making it very difficult for Bazuru to dodge, and wherever he flew, Lloyd would cast a barrier to block his path. While casting, Lloyd also explained to Grima that normally he could cast 20 spells simultaneously. In fact, if Grima helped, the number would be a bit higher, and when Grima entered Lloyd's hand, Bazuru was beyond saving. Although he had hidden under the lake and swam like Superman, Lloyd's barriers still followed his tail everywhere. And every time he dodged a technique, Bazuru felt extraordinary. But eventually, Bazuru couldn't dodge anymore and lay trapped in Lloyd's gigantic multi-dimensional dome barrier, while Grima's mouth was tired after chanting so many spells with Lloyd. Outside, Lloyd began listing all the sins Bazuru had committed. First was killing the parents of the bear-wolf pack and other monsters. Then Bazuru had used monsters to test his own power, so this time Lloyd would use him to test his advanced techniques. Seeing this, Bazuru begged Lloyd to allow him to negotiate. But no matter how much he shouted, Lloyd coldly continued chanting spells. He cast hundreds of spells of different elements, causing Grima to faint. Lloyd even set these techniques to repeat for 30 minutes. And inside the barrier now was a rainbow of various types of magic, interspersed with pitiful cries from Bazuru. When Bazuru became completely silent, Lloyd had to ask if he was still alive, and he felt a bit disappointed because after just 5 minutes, Bazuru was already gone. So Lloyd withdrew his barrier to let Bazuru say his final words. But Lloyd saw that everyone had woken up, so he hurriedly went to boast to them about what had happened, leaving only Grima to chat with Bazuru. Grima told him that currently, it was living very happily with Lloyd, and Grima was still accumulating power daily to someday take revenge on Lloyd. Hearing this, Bazuru transferred all his magical power to Grima to help it achieve its wish. But with just this small amount of power, Grima thought the day of revenge was still far away. Meanwhile, Lloyd was trying to explain to everyone that a mage named Robert had defeated the demon. Fortunately, they believed it completely, so today's events remained Lloyd's secret. And when they returned to the capital, the citizens poured into the streets to congratulate Prince Amber on defeating the monsters. But when people there showed contempt for Lloyd, Shifa glared at them, silencing them immediately. As soon as they returned to the palace, the king congratulated Amber on his achievement of slaying monsters and defeating demons. Then he wondered where the two adventurers, Tuan and Robert, were. It turned out that Tuan, believing Robert was real, had set out to chase after him. But Amber believed that in this journey, Lloyd had contributed the most. Thanks to the weapons enhanced by Lloyd, everyone had avoided danger from the monster horde. So Amber asked the king to include Lloyd in the list of those eligible to succeed the throne. Moreover, Lloyd was also humble and not arrogant, very suitable to be king of a country. Hearing this, the king warned Amber that if he did so, he would have another competitor. But Amber believed that as long as the country was better, he didn't mind not being king. At this point, the king happily agreed with Amber to allow Lloyd to compete for the throne. But Lloyd stood up and straightforwardly refused because he wasn't free to be king. Since birth, Lloyd had only liked playing and researching magic. From now on, Lloyd would have a new friend, the bear wolf from yesterday, which must have liked Lloyd a lot to leave the forest and follow him. Seeing this dog with fluffy fur, Lloyd had to exclaim how good it felt to touch, making Grima also pretend to fluff up its fur to keep up appearances. At that moment, Shifa arrived, so Lloyd had to hide Grima in the dog's fur. And he told Shifa that from now on, the dog's name would be Shiro, because its fur was pure white. After getting a new pet, Lloyd wanted to teach it many things. Shifa believed that only a master of monsters could command it. Usually, they would use magical power to control animals, but she believed that for Lloyd, taming animals would be a piece of cake. Seeing this, Grima acknowledged that Lloyd was truly a magic enthusiast, as he had easily rejected the throne just to pursue his own passion. Amber and the king judged Lloyd to be a very humble prince who didn't need status, but both hoped that when he grew up, he would have the determination to become the king of this kingdom. From that day onward, Lloyd began the process of training the monster dog Shiro with Shifa, and Shiro quickly understood some simple commands from Lloyd, like standing, sitting, or barking. Now Lloyd wanted to give some more difficult commands, so he tried to write out a sequence of magic commands, but the result was that the dog acted erratically. Shifa saw that they needed a monster taming expert to give Lloyd advice, and she remembered someone who knew a lot about monster training experience. So Shifa invited Lloyd to go to a place called Ollie's Garden, although Lloyd didn't like going there much. The two of them later arrived at a garden that housed many species of animals, so Grima wondered who Ollie was to be so formidable. Lloyd explained that Ollie was his sister and the sixth princess of the kingdom. She loved animals very much and even kept monsters. After those words, Ollie rushed over to hug Lloyd tightly after many days of not seeing him, and she even kissed him, causing him to faint on the spot. Even Ollie's maid, Eris, was upset because whenever the princess met Lloyd, she was always this enthusiastic. Ollie admitted that Lloyd's pet Shiro was very cute, while Shifa thought this princess didn't understand anything about magic, so she might not know how to communicate with monsters. But Lloyd believed in Ollie's abilities, so he wanted to see her pets. Ollie said that it had been standing behind the two of them for some time now. The monster, in the shape of a horse named Luru, was a high-level species of bear wolf, and Lloyd was very surprised that he couldn't sense it using Kai. Luru had even taken Shifa's hairband without her knowing. It turned out that Ollie had previously ordered Luru to perform a sequence of actions like that, but she had given orders without any gestures, making Lloyd very curious, so he asked Ollie to show him some experience in training Shiro. Ollie said that the secret was love, leaving everyone speechless. She continued babbling that with love, any monster could understand their owner, and just hearing Ollie's voice, all the monsters in the garden flocked to her. But Ollie was very annoyed when she heard Eris say that one day she would become food for the monsters. Lloyd also believed that with love, he would be able to train his pet, and when Shifa saw Lloyd's interest in love, she fantasized about one day devoting her love to the prince. After some observation, Lloyd realized that Ollie had transmitted magic to the animals through telepathy. She had unconsciously connected her mind to the animals through magic. So instead of giving orders, Ollie just needed to imagine in her head to be able to communicate with them. Right after that, Lloyd used telepathy to connect with Shiro and signaled it. Indeed, Shiro ran 3 circles around the yard and barked once, exactly as Lloyd had thought. And seeing Lloyd successfully train his pet, Eris had to exclaim that he was a genius at telepathy. But the princess insisted that it was love for animals. Lloyd also admitted that he needed empathy to successfully conquer them. So Ollie was very happy to hug Lloyd because he had understood her. After the pet training trip, Shifa wanted to practice swordsmanship, making Lloyd very worried. Even when Prince Amber needed Lloyd for something, Shifa was ready to fight for him. But Lloyd chose to go with Amber because he didn't like sword practice at all. And it turned out that the fourth Prince Diane needed to question Lloyd about something, so he sought him out. While the pet was practicing swimming, Diane asked Lloyd about engraving magic onto swords, and Diane didn't believe in Lloyd's abilities, so he forced him to prove it in front of him. According to Amber, from a young age, Diane had studied blacksmithing in a neighboring country, so Diane was very interested in magic that bestowed power onto weapons. In front of his two brothers, Lloyd used enhancement marrow fluid as ink, then used a pen to engrave the marrow fluid onto the sword. Each pattern was carefully and precisely drawn by Lloyd. Yet Diane observed and claimed that Lloyd was a fraudulent kid trying to deceive craftsmen. However, when he saw Lloyd's sword, Diane was speechless, not knowing what technique he had used on it, because the sword was now not only lighter but also increased in power. Diane was very proud of Lloyd and believed that together they would create the strongest sword on Earth. Diane's plan was to engrave magic directly onto the sword during forging, believing that when an excellent blacksmith combined with a talented mage, they would definitely create the ultimate magic sword. And Diane dreamed that one day all soldiers would possess a magic sword. Hearing this, Lloyd found it very interesting, so he accepted Diane as his boss to start the work immediately. From that day on, Lloyd was always present at the forge to make swords with Diane, and Diane always looked forward to the day he could wield a sword that could slash fire. After some manufacturing, Lloyd was ready to put the marrow fluid talisman onto the molten steel. But because Lloyd stuffed too much magic into the talisman, the steel shattered. Outside, Shifa and Shiro were diligently watching Lloyd, so Diane invited both into the forge to help for convenience. Lloyd was feeling discouraged because he had been failing at engraving magic. Seeing this, Diane encouraged the young boy that if he kept trying, he would soon succeed. However, Diane revealed that he had bought a bunch of marrow fluid outside at a very cheap price, so Lloyd had to use water magic to filter all this marrow fluid to see. Indeed, red magic powder was an important ingredient but was lacking. While Diane couldn't find it because he had never gone to exterminate monsters, Lloyd thought he probably had to secretly go to raid dungeons to get red magic powder. Even Shifa suggested going into dungeons to hunt final bosses and collect ingredients. Hearing this, Lloyd hurriedly refused, fearing exposure of his escapes from the palace. But after the previous monster incident, Shifa had suggested to the king to allow Lloyd to explore dungeons to broaden his knowledge. So Lloyd had to leave the forge to follow Shifa to the Adventurers Guild. On his first visit to the guild, Lloyd was very impressed, and the receptionist named Katarina reminded Lloyd to provide his name and address to register. Next, Lloyd would have to touch a crystal ball to assess his abilities. In his previous life, Lloyd had been tested with this crystal ball before, so he feared that if he touched it now, the ball might explode. So Lloyd had to try to suppress the magical power in his body as much as possible. As a result, all his stats were at the lowest, except for magic, which received an A. The adventurers around, seeing this, mocked Lloyd as a mediocre rank E kid. But Katarina saw Lloyd as very talented because his magic score was very high, even on par with the Silver Sword Princess, which made the adventurers feel resentful. It was known that the Silver Sword Princess was a very powerful adventurer who had conquered countless dungeons, so they believed that the idea of a rank E kid being on par with her was pure fiction. Shifa didn't care about them, so she reminded Katarina to quickly assign a mission. The leader, seeing this, came to persuade Shifa to join, but she swung her sword and cut off his beard. Katarina then let them know that Shifa was the Silver Sword Princess, making everyone fearful. Just then, Tuan was present at the Adventurers Guild to receive a mission, and as soon as she saw that girl, Shifa quickly led Lloyd home. Tuan confided that in the past few days, she had rushed into dungeons looking for Robert, but couldn't find him anywhere, so now she demanded to get acquainted with Prince Amber to alleviate her loneliness. But Shifa didn't care about Tuan's romance matters and only demanded her to return the cloak. After some struggling, Shifa successfully recovered Lloyd's cloak. As for Lloyd, he was very impressed with Shifa because she was a talented adventurer. But according to Shifa, she still had some unresolved cases, like the Assassin Guild case. Afterward, all three entered the dungeon to slay monsters, and after a day, they successfully collected the reward chest. Meanwhile, Amber had come to Diane's forge to announce an important matter, that there would soon be a military uprising or war in the capital. Hearing this, Diane panicked and wanted to accelerate the production of magic swords. But Amber told Diane not to worry about the war. He only wanted Diane to become closer to Lloyd. So now what Diane needed to do was calmly research to achieve results, at which point many citizens of the kingdom would be saved. At this moment, Lloyd's group returned with the dungeon chest. Thanks to this, that very night they successfully created the first magic sword. So the next morning, Diane took the sword to the training area to try it out. Unexpectedly, with just one swing, he created a terrifying explosion, frightening everyone. Everything in front stood no chance and evaporated, so this sword seemed a bit too overpowered. From then on, the name of the sword was named after Lloyd and Diane, while Lloyd comfortably went to bed for a good sleep after a day of hard work making swords. Because the initial sword was too powerful, Lloyd had to reduce the damage of the fireball spell. But he also noticed that Diane was very hasty in sword making, hiding something from him. While everyone was sound asleep, Lloyd suddenly sensed someone sneaking into the palace. It was a girl wearing a black cloak, looking very mysterious. As she was secretly finding her way into the palace, Lloyd flew down to catch the intruder, creating a barrier so she couldn't escape. After saying good evening, he wanted to chat with the assassin about her purpose, but she revealed herself and created a poisonous scent that paralyzed opponents. When Lloyd inhaled the scent, he tried to use a purification spell, but it had no effect, and the assassin told him that no one could purify her poison. Normally, purification spells would cure any poison Lloyd had encountered, proving that this poison was very special, something Lloyd was experiencing for the first time. He believed that only cursed people could cast such magic. The girl also admitted that she had been cursed by poison since birth. In fact, she was known in the underworld as Zen the Poison Butterfly, and with just one kick, Zen broke Lloyd's barrier, impressing him. Before leaving, Zen told Lloyd not to worry because he had only inhaled a small amount of poison. Although not life-threatening, it would be painful for the next few days. Lloyd wasn't worried at all, as he had switched to using Kai to continuously heal from the poison. Although Lloyd could have caught Zen, he let her go to follow her back to the Assassin Guild's hideout. It turned out that earlier, Shifa had told Lloyd about 6 wanted members of the Assassin Guild, and they were very good at concealing their presence. Moreover, each person in the guild had a special power, so Lloyd was very interested in meeting them. Although Zen knew how to hide her presence, Lloyd could still sense her every movement, so he quickly set out to follow Zen back to the Assassin Guild's base. Shifa also woke up to follow Lloyd, but was too late. Meanwhile, the 6 members of the Assassin Guild were listening to Zen's report. She said that the palace was mass-producing magic swords, so she suggested the group act quickly. But a man named Golly reminded Zen not to play the leader when the group no longer had a leader, and the conversation quickly stopped because they detected Lloyd's presence. Knowing he was discovered, Lloyd jumped down to greet them, and Zen couldn't believe that he could be lucid after being exposed to her poison. Since their base had been discovered by Lloyd, they decided not to let him leave. But Lloyd wasn't intimidated, so he dismissed his barrier to exchange techniques with them immediately. First, Lloyd prepared the 100-flower fist stance, just like Tuan, and when they saw Lloyd using martial arts, a member of the group named Babylon rushed forward to engage with him. Babylon's movements were also very fast, causing Lloyd to continuously be on the defensive. Through Babylon's movements, Lloyd assessed that he was very agile in combat. Even Babylon's body was as flexible as rubber, allowing him to attack unexpectedly. And Babylon also introduced himself as a cursed person, which is why he had such a body. Before Lloyd could be impressed, someone named Crow snuck behind him and chanted a spell that made his body extremely heavy. But Lloyd used a body enhancement spell to dodge Golly's sky-shattering punch. However, Golly possessed a spider thread curse, so Lloyd got stuck to him. Seeing the threads sticking too tightly, Lloyd abandoned his clothes to escape. But a girl named Teria closed in on Lloyd and continuously swung her sword at him. Teria possessed a wound curse, so she could share wounds from herself to Lloyd's body. However, Lloyd didn't feel pain at all. Instead, he was very interested in her power. After Teria's sword dance, the introductions on both sides were complete. Teria thought Lloyd must be feeling scared by now, but Lloyd had never known fear and had healed his wounds instantly. Then Lloyd created 2 swords and mimicked Shifa's techniques. Just seeing Shifa's silhouette, the Assassin Guild became very disturbed, as she had previously traumatized them. So when Lloyd charged, they quickly dodged. each person scattering in a different direction. The first person Lloyd approached was Babylon, so he was beaten face down by Lloyd. Fortunately, Babylon possessed a flexible body, so during impacts, damage was reduced. While Lloyd wasn't paying attention, Crow chanted a spell to attack him, but this spell hit Golly instead, sending him flying out of sight. Lloyd had used Shifa's sword technique to deal with the next person, Crow, starting with the twin dragons ascending to heaven and ending with the flying swallow descending to earth. But Lloyd felt a bit worried for Crow because he seemed very hurt after that move. After dealing with Crow, Lloyd continued to rush toward Teria, and although he knew Teria could share damage, Lloyd didn't hesitate to injure her. Finally, Lloyd unleashed Tuan's 100-flower fist, pushing Golly into the wall. Now only Zen remained, sitting trembling after witnessing Lloyd's power. Yet he still invited Zen to demonstrate more of her poison. Golly quickly came over, saying that Zen couldn't control her poison, so once she released it, everyone there would be affected. Hearing this, Lloyd suddenly realized that everyone in the group couldn't control their curse powers, so he decided to help them. First, Lloyd dodged Golly's hug, then suddenly appeared behind him and struck him with a palm. Seeing this, Zen was very angry and rushed to Lloyd, attacking him freely. But Golly told Zen to stop because he wasn't injured. On the contrary, now Golly could control the curse in his body and no longer shot threads randomly. It turned out that Lloyd had cast a spell to help Golly regulate the magical power in his body. And although this was the first time Lloyd had done this, he was very happy that the technique had succeeded. It's just that Lloyd's pants seemed a bit dirty, so he threw them away too. While he was at it, Lloyd also helped the entire assassin group control their curses, and after receiving Lloyd's magic, they could now control their curse powers smoothly. Crow could now talk without accidentally chanting spells. Teria could control her wound curse, and Babylon's body could move like a normal person. Only Zen, although very happy, still pretended to be angry because Lloyd had touched her earlier, and now she could wear clothes comfortably without worrying about spreading poison. Seeing Lloyd without clothes, Teria prepared a new outfit for him, and everyone in the group organized a very lavish feast to thank him. Meanwhile, Golly had a very important matter to ask Lloyd's opinion on. It turned out that the group had unanimously decided to ask Lloyd to lead them. Of course, Lloyd immediately refused because he was busy researching magic. He didn't even want to listen to Golly's story, as he found it too long-winded. But as soon as he heard about the leader Jay with the ability to teleport instantly, Lloyd paid close attention. However, before Golly could finish speaking, Jay had returned to the base to greet everyone. It turned out that Jay couldn't control his teleportation curse, so he had traveled around the world. He had even bought several souvenirs to give to everyone. This time, Jay returned to tell everyone something very important. He decided to create the symbol of the Assassin Guild in the form of coins, and from now on, the group would accept underground missions that the Adventurer Guild couldn't solve. After completing each mission, they would place a coin at the scene. The purpose was to remind others that the Assassin Guild would fight for world peace. Hearing this, everyone agreed because now the guild didn't have to hide anymore. But Jay still couldn't control his curse, so he was teleported away immediately. Lloyd was very disappointed because he hadn't been able to admire Jay's teleportation power. Golly told everyone about Lord Lordos's military uprising, and at that moment, Jay sent a letter by teleportation, causing the entire group to set out immediately. So when Sheffer rode her dog into the base, no one was there anymore, only a letter on the wall saying that Lloyd had gone with the Assassin Guild to Lord Lordos's mansion. After reading this letter, Amber was very confused because the kingdom of Salem and Lordos were tense, and he believed that the Assassin Guild had joined hands with Lordos to capture Lloyd as a hostage. And to make matters worse, Shifa had found evidence Lloyd's sticky clothes left at the scene. Fearing that his brother was being tortured, Amber and Shifa were very angry and demanded to set out to rescue him immediately. Previously, Jay had sent a letter by teleportation, first apologizing to everyone for not contacting them for so long. Then Jay said that the Lordos authorities were preparing for war, but Jay had defeated them and become the new lord. So now he wanted to invite everyone there for a feast. Although everyone was happy, Lloyd felt something wasn't right. He had noticed it from the guild badge attached to the letter. After receiving news from Jay, the entire assassin group wanted to go to Lordos immediately, and Zen asked Lloyd to go with them to cure Jay's curse. But Lloyd only reminded everyone of the suspicious point in this letter. Initially, it suddenly appeared on the table in front of everyone, proving that the letter had been teleported very precisely. But teleportation magic was inherently a very difficult spell that no one could explain. And if Jay could use this skill so accurately, perhaps he had already controlled the teleportation spell. Everyone agreed with this and was very happy, while Lloyd also agreed to go with them to witness Jay's teleportation firsthand. Zen felt a bit uneasy, so Lloyd encouraged her that he would take care of everything. And after witnessing Lloyd's kindness, Zen immediately developed feelings for him. After that, Lloyd took everyone to Lordos at a terrifying speed, and soon they landed in Lordos to prepare to meet Jay. Although they had only flown a little, everyone seemed motion sick. And while everyone was resting, Zen decided to go into the forest to find something to eat. Babylon revealed that Zen had grown up in the forest, so she was trying to show off to Lloyd. Furthermore, since childhood, Zen had accidentally killed her loved ones with her poison curse, and from then on, Zen had lived alone in the forest until Jay brought her to the Assassin Guild. Just seeing Zen's aggressive face, everyone was concerned about her. But Jay had encouraged Zen that he would teach her properly. Jay had even gone crazy over Zen's poison, sniffing too much and fainting. However, Jay still decided to let Zen live here with everyone, and the group happily divided tasks among themselves to support and care for the little girl. Golly would take on the task of education, while Babylon would take on cooking. Meanwhile, Teria and Jay would design outfits for the little girl. After some time, they had completed a black outfit for Zen that could suppress the poison. And from then on, Zen could live comfortably with everyone without worrying about affecting them. Moreover, Jay also gave Zen a hairpin, making the little girl so happy she cried. So Zen always considered Jay as her brother, and the 6 people in the guild regarded each other as an inseparable family. After hearing their story, Lloyd wanted to meet Jay even more. Grima was quite surprised to see Lloyd care about others like this. Right after that, Zen prepared a hot pot that looked no different from pig slop. Yet Zen still insisted that the food she cooked was the best on earth. Seeing this, Terrier reminded Zen that Lloyd was a prince and couldn't eat this. But Lloyd and Grima ate the hot pot very deliciously because in his previous life, he had eaten even more terrible dishes. Seeing this, everyone tried it and judged it to be very delicious. And when she saw the warm atmosphere around, Zen wished that Jay was here to eat with everyone. Previously, Jay had informed the group about the Adventurer Guild considering stopping the hunt for them. Hearing this, everyone was happy because they were about to escape from their hidden life. But Jay didn't seem happy at all. He admitted that he had always lied about being a wanderer. In fact, Jay was the 3rd son of the Lord in the Lordos region, and all along, Jay had joined the group only to use everyone. Currently, Lordos was under the cruel rule of Jay's family, and they were preparing for war, but Jay didn't want war at all. That's why Jay needed the power of everyone here. Zen was very surprised to learn that Jay was a rich young master from Lordos, but no one showed surprise or blamed Jay at all, because everyone had their own path and purpose in life. The group was also ready to help Jay fight against his family. When Jay learned about everyone's feelings, he was very touched, but this was Jay's personal matter, so he decided to solve it himself, because if everyone got involved, they would be in danger, even being hunted and no longer enjoying freedom. Although Jay's body was cursed, over time, he had lived very happily with everyone, and now it was time for Jay to return to Lordos to end the war. Moreover, Jay also had a dream of becoming the Lord of Lordos, so he instructed everyone to maintain the activities of the Assassin Guild and not do anything wrong. When Jay became Lord, he would definitely welcome everyone to live there with him. Upon hearing another story about Jay, Grima was moved to tears, while Lloyd, after eating his fill, simply fell asleep. And everyone was speechless when they saw Lloyd sleeping while still maintaining a barrier. At this point, Zen came up with the idea to let Lloyd sleep here while they would go to scout the mansion first. Because Jay suspected that Jay's letter was forced, they had to go check it out. Everyone found this reasonable, so they let Lloyd continue sleeping on the grass. But Grima didn't feel good about this at all. Fearing that everyone might encounter trouble, Grima would go with them to be sure. As soon as they reached the mansion, everyone saw a luxurious feast of nobles. Moreover, there was no killing intent here, so the Assassin Guild wanted to go right in. But Grima wanted to go back to inform Lloyd about the situation first. At this moment, a dwarf discovered the group, so he brought all 5 people into the mansion to attend the feast. As this was their first time attending a noble's feast, everyone was very bewildered. While Grima wanted to return to Lloyd, but Zen held it back because she was very nervous before meeting Jay again. Right after that, Jay appeared to greet the group, making them very happy. And Jay felt that noble clothes didn't suit him much, so he teleported into commoner clothes. Seeing this, everyone was very impressed that Jay had indeed controlled the teleportation spell. Grima reminded Zen to greet Jay after a period of separation. But Zen was so moved that she didn't know what to say to Jay. Only her tears continuously fell. However, the figure before Zen revealed its true form as a demon lord along with his subordinate, and this one used Crow's curse power to force everyone to kneel before him. His curse so strong that no one could lift their heads. Then he allowed his subordinates to eat them to absorb each person's curse. And seeing this, Grima attacked him to help everyone escape. Because Grima knew this demon lord was extremely dangerous, but he teleported behind Grima and gave it some very powerful kicks, causing Grima to fly straight to where Lloyd was sound asleep. Because he heard a very loud noise, Lloyd also woke up and saw Grima panicking, reporting on the situation inside the mansion. Over here, everyone was still bewildered, not understanding what was happening with Jay. But they quickly realized that around them were all demons living parasitically on human bodies. The parasite in Jay introduced himself as Wizar, coming from across the ocean. Wizar's purpose was to take away Jay's teleportation power. Currently, he had completely taken over Jay's body, so he could teleport easily. Wizar also recounted that it took several months to erase Jay's will, and during that time, he had suffered greatly when tortured by Wizar. Seeing Zen showing anger, he kicked her, causing the hairpin from Jay to fall to the ground. According to Wizar, Jay had repeatedly begged him to spare his friends, as Jay knew that Wizar was targeting those who possessed curse powers. But afterward, Jay's brain had been eaten by Wizar. When only a bit of consciousness remained, Jay decided to log out to take Wizar with him. However, Wizar had used his power to restore Jay, forcing him to experience life in hell. From then on, Jay had been depressed until his mind disappeared, and when they saw Wizar telling the story with a mocking expression, everyone showed hatred for him. He even used Jay's voice, making everyone more angry. At this point, Wizar stomped on the hairpin given by Jay, breaking it and deeply hurting Zen. Then he allowed his subordinates to eat the members of the Assassin Guild. The purpose was for them to seize the cursed powers within them. But Wizar suddenly saw a magic suppression pattern on Zen's arm. So he asked her who had done it, and what effect this suppression magic had. However, Zen wouldn't say a word to him because she couldn't betray her friends. In this life or death moment, Zen could only remember Jay and her past memories with him, while Wizar kept questioning Zen about who had cast this suppression magic on her. At that moment, Lloyd's barrier surrounded the members of the Assassin Guild, much to their surprise. From high above, Lloyd cast a powerful spell directly at Wizar. Lloyd's sky-shattering attack created an enormous crater inside the mansion. Then Lloyd let Wizar know that he was the person the demon was looking for. The demon clan gaped in astonishment at witnessing Lloyd's power, while Zen was overjoyed that Lloyd had come to save her once again. After examining the wounds on Zen's face, he healed her and reminded everyone to quickly leave because the demon clan was craving the bodies of cursed people. Although Zen didn't want to go at all, the group took her with them, because if they stayed, they would only hinder Lloyd. The subordinates thought Wizar had been roasted, but he was still alive and grinning, and when they saw their master return, the subordinates became extremely obedient. Wizar said that the Assassin Guild had skills to hide even from him, so he ordered his subordinates to bring them back if they didn't want to lose their lives. But Lloyd was still there, so he didn't allow them to proceed, and Lloyd unleashed a very powerful spell that made the subordinates flee in disarray. Over here, the Assassin Guild was in awe of Lloyd's immense magical power. Now Lloyd was ready to punish Wizar for daring to touch his friends. Two of Wizar's subordinates rushed forward to draw Lloyd's attention. Then Wizar cast a technique that penetrated Lloyd's barrier, surprising him as he didn't know whether to try to take the hit or dodge. Lloyd decided to dodge downward, causing Wizar's two subordinates to take the hit. Through his magic appraisal, Lloyd realized that anyone hit by that technique would have their heart stop beating and die immediately. Grima assessed that Wizar was someone who could self-generate magical power similar to Crow's curse, but Wizar's level was much higher than Crow's. Lloyd saw that ordinary techniques could be blocked by barriers, but direct magical power like Wizar's could penetrate easily, so Lloyd began to show interest in his power. Meanwhile, Jay's subordinates were running around in disarray, losing their direction, so he appeared quite disappointed with such a useless bunch. According to Grima, demons usually divided into ranks indicating power. The ones running below would be ranked at the lowest, rank 10. Grima stood at rank 3, while Wizar was above even rank 1. meaning he belonged to the royal class in the demon realm's nobility. Wizar's power was in the category of great calamity, so even 100 rank 1 demons would be no match for him. Therefore, Grima advised Lloyd to keep his distance from Wizar and not take risks. But Lloyd was very interested in Wizar, so he approached him and introduced himself as the 7th Prince. Hearing this, Wizar remembered that the 7th Prince was someone Jay had wanted to meet very much. Coincidentally, Lloyd also wanted to meet Jay, so first, he had to eliminate Wizar. Wizar also reproached Lloyd for helping the Assassin Guild escape, as those were the bodies Wizar craved, so Wizar planned to take Lloyd's body to compensate for what he had lost. After a battle of wills, both decided to exchange a few techniques to entertain each other. Meanwhile, Tuan was demanding that Katarina assign her a mission where she could work with handsome men, or if not, working with Lloyd would do. Hearing this, Katarina was horrified because Tuan even wanted to devour a child like Lloyd, while Grima was sincerely advising Lloyd to flee from here because Wizar was a demon with terrifying power. To him, human magic was just like a few ripples, while he was someone lying at the bottom of the ocean where light couldn't reach. Wizar demonstrated a bit of his power by shooting through Lloyd's barrier, but it seemed the barrier layer was a bit thick, so he created many spears. Then he released the spears toward Lloyd, forcing him to continuously dodge around the castle. And each time a barrier layer broke, Lloyd immediately regenerated it to defend against Wizar's storm-like attacks. Now wherever Lloyd flew, Wizar would shoot spears there. However, Wizar didn't let Lloyd run in circles continuously like that. He teleported instantly to Lloyd and delivered a kick that deformed his barrier. Then he created a drill to attack Lloyd from behind, but he timely created a stone statue for defense. Over here, the citizens were very impressed with the high-level battle between Lloyd and Wizar, but Wizar's subordinates suddenly discovered the Assassin Guild very close to them and immediately gave chase. So Golly reminded Babylon to climb outside first to clear the path for the group. At this moment, Grima was so scared that it cried because it had to participate in Lloyd's battle, while Wizar informed Lloyd that he could freely use Jay's instantaneous teleportation power. Although Jay couldn't control teleportation before, for demons, as long as they had the body, they could easily use any cursed ability. So Wizar advised Lloyd to give up so he could take all the Assassin Guild members' bodies, because Lloyd could not dodge his next attack. With those words, Wizar teleported a spear behind Lloyd, giving him no time to dodge. He even teleported many more spears, making Lloyd look like a porcupine, while below, the demon clan was frantically rushing toward the Assassin Guild, demanding they surrender their bodies. But Golly created a special mouse glue trap that prevented them from moving. Then Crow chanted an incantation to press them down, making these guys stick even tighter, while Babylon was trying his best to open the city gate. And when the gate was just pulled up, he reminded everyone to quickly run out. But just as Crow and Zen got outside, the demon clan flexed all their muscles to escape from the glue trap. Seeing this, Teria decided to stay behind to buy time for the group to escape first, and she used her ability to share wounds, causing the demons to be injured in their legs. Then she reminded everyone to run toward the forest and erase their presence. But the demon clan recovered very quickly, so Teria had to use the sword in her hand to continue destroying their legs. Although Zen wanted to stay and fight with everyone, Golly pushed the little girl out and then collapsed the gate, while Golly decided to stay and assist Teria because she could hardly handle this bunch alone. To eliminate them, Golly reminded Teria to use her strongest technique. The demon clan began to show extreme panic, because Teria was ready to exchange her life to destroy them all at once. And when the demon clan rushed together, they were stopped by Golly's mouse glue. Zen saw everyone sacrificing like this and felt very distressed. Before, the group had promised to enjoy freedom together, yet now Zen could only helplessly watch as those two lost their lives, and she couldn't stop it. Right after that, Teria used her final sword strike to finish off all the enemies. Over here, Wizar was mocking the Assassin Guild's final efforts, because anyway, those people couldn't escape from his hands. At the same time, he also pitied Lloyd because he had been sacrificed even before them. But then Wizar suddenly realized that what was being stabbed below was just a pile of rubble, and Lloyd suddenly attacked with Grima's sword, but he teleported away in time. Wizar was very surprised that Lloyd had used a clay substitution, and now he carried a rather mysterious sword, but Lloyd admitted that he was currently at a disadvantage, so the prince had to ask Wizar to change to another place to fight to avoid trouble. It turned out that Prince Amber's army had arrived, and was continuously firing hell flames into the city. and the demon clan couldn't dodge in time and was immediately roasted. While everyone was still confused about what was happening, Shifa used her sword to break open the city gate. But when Prince Amber entered, he still thought that his brother Lloyd was being kidnapped, so Amber ordered all troops to charge in and find Lloyd at all costs. Meanwhile, Tuan was feeling very frustrated because everyone in town had a partner. Suddenly, she heard someone say that Prince Amber was on his way to Lordos to rescue Lloyd, so Tuan immediately rushed there to assist the handsome men. The demon clan couldn't withstand the flames, so they had to jump into the water, while Zen felt very happy, thinking that the second prince had come to rescue her. But earlier, Amber and Shifa had gathered the assassin guild to interrogate them, making them extremely confused. Shifa believed that the assassin guild had kidnapped Lloyd, so she demanded they reveal where the prince was. If they remained silent or lied, then every minute, one person would have to die. Everyone, frightened, confessed that Lloyd was fighting inside the mansion. Because earlier Lloyd had instructed them not to reveal his power to anyone else, Babylon warned them absolutely not to mention that Lloyd was fighting the final boss. So Zen said that Lloyd was only fighting an insignificant enemy. Shifa thought the assassin guild was lying, so she prepared to deal with the first person. But before that, Amber wanted to know who had touched Lloyd's precious underwear. And when he learned it was the bald man's behavior, Amber and Shifa were extremely upset. At this point, Zen stood up and admitted that she was also very worried about Lloyd, because Lloyd was fighting to protect her family, the assassin guild, so Zen hoped Shifa would believe what she said. At that moment, a demon desperately rushed over, but Ollie intervened just in time, and Ollie believed Zen was telling the truth because her pet could identify those with bad intentions. Now that the demon clan had returned, Amber asked Shifa to go rescue Lloyd. But Zen stopped Shifa because Lloyd was fighting a super weak enemy and didn't need anyone's support. At this moment, Wizar's technique destroyed part of the bridge, so no one could enter anymore, and the demon clan had fallen into the water, so they were trying to swim ashore. Up above, Lloyd was very pleased that no one could disturb him anymore. Seeing this, Wizar continued the unfinished battle with Lloyd, but Lloyd was still a bit worried, not knowing if everyone below was okay. At this point, Amber had ordered the soldiers to use magic swords to attack the demon clan, making them scream in the flames, so Lloyd felt more assured to focus on the battle with Wizar. However, the demon clan wasn't affected by weak magic because they easily recovered. They even asked Amber to make the fire bigger because this burning was too small. Even if Diane had cast the flame sphere, he still couldn't eliminate them. Seeing the situation becoming increasingly difficult, Amber wanted to ask Shifa for help. But when he turned around, he couldn't see the maid anymore. It turned out that Shifa was riding on Shiro's back and ordering it to jump straight into the mansion. She even made the dog hold a rope in its mouth and jump so she could swing along. But with such a fat body, it could only jump a few meters before swimming on its back in the lake. At this moment, a demon climbed onto the bridge rail and suddenly attempted to slash Shifa from behind. But she promptly drew her sword to block his strike. Because both moved so quickly, no one could see anything, and the demon proudly introduced himself as a rank 8 demon in the demon realm. Like Shifa, he was also a sword master using the technique called Heavenly Demon Single Blade Flow. Shifa realized that the demon clan also divided into high and low ranks, so she wondered if Basuru's rank was higher than this one. She also wondered why he put excrement on his head, which made him very upset because that was his extremely fashionable hat. Amber's army had been burning the demon clan for a while, but they weren't affected at all. Even one of them had circled behind to ambush Amber. But fortunately, Babylon had intervened to save him. Amber thanked Babylon but felt he was a bit cruel. Hearing this, Babylon explained that although he was an assassin, he had never disregarded anyone's life. Currently, those possessed by the demon clan could no longer be saved. Even Babylon's leader, Jay, had lost his life to them. Hearing this, Amber thanked Babylon for his advice. Now he had enough courage to liberate these poor citizens. Then Amber used the magic sword to increase his own magical power. At the same time, he formed seals to create many hell flames in the sky. And when they fell, the demon clan was completely incinerated. Though very tired, Amber ordered the soldiers to use all their might to defeat the invading demon clan, because this was a battle to avenge the citizens who had been killed by them. Meanwhile, Shifa, with dual swords in hand, had entered a life-or-death battle with the short demon, and both swordsmen had extremely fast attack speeds, making those watching dizzy. It was known that all the techniques of the demon came from the Heavenly Demon Single Blade Flow swordsmanship. while Shifa's techniques all came from the Illy's family's sword style. When both rushed straight at each other, exchanging techniques, it looked no different than dragons and snakes ascending to the clouds. Shifa had just switched to Wolf Fang when her opponent immediately switched to Great Heavenly Dog, and when these two techniques clashed, they created a very strong win. After a while of sword swinging, both sides were wounded in the legs, but the demon had the ability to recover, and he decided to take Shifa's body at all costs. At that point, he could use her Illy's style, and with those words, he used a magnificent sword-drawing technique and rushed to tear Shifa's skirt. He told her that this was a technique from the body he currently possessed. This person had practiced swordsmanship so diligently that his hands were covered in scars, and when he took over this body, he had inherited that person's memories, along with the sword skills that the person had taken many years of practice to acquire. However, Shifa suddenly jumped into the air and unleashed the demon's own heavenly demon single-blade flow swordsmanship, forcing him to struggle to defend. After this technique, he was very amazed, not understanding how Shifa could use his swordsmanship. It turned out that Shifa only needed to observe the demonstration once to learn swordsmanship from her opponent. So she taunted the demon, saying his head was full of excrement, not knowing how to learn but only knowing how to possess others' bodies. And while the demon was very upset, Shifa called Shiro over, then rummaged through his fur to find something very special. It was the demon-slaying sword that Lloyd had forged for her before. Shifa declared that those who used borrowed bodies could never reach the pinnacle of swordsmanship. So now she would show him the results of her excruciating days of training. It turned out that since being defeated by Basiru, Shifa had been diligently practicing swordsmanship alone every day, and during each practice session, she had to use many swords, because when Shifa swung a sword with just a bit of force, it would immediately bend. She felt that if she kept using swords like this, she couldn't unleash her full strength in real combat. Not to mention, demons like Basiru usually possessed very hard bodies, so ordinary swords couldn't cut them. However, that day, Lloyd had happily brought Shifa a new sword. Previously, Lloyd had helped Diane forge magic swords, so he also assisted Lloyd in perfecting this sword. It was known that the sword wasn't enchanted with any magic, because Lloyd only focused on upgrading its flexibility so the sword could withstand all of Shifa's strength. So now she could cut down all the insolent demons without fearing a broken sword. But Lloyd also noted that bodies controlled by demons were very strong, so to eliminate them, Lloyd advised Shifa that she needed to deliver a one-hit kill strike. Shifa felt very happy to be given such a precious sword by Lloyd, so she rewarded Lloyd with a hug and vowed to follow him for the rest of her life. But Diane had given the sword a very funny name, leaving Shifa speechless. This time, Shifa swore she wouldn't disappoint Lloyd like before, so she would use Lloyd's sword to slaughter this insolent demon. However, he showed no fear at all and instead recalled Jay's painful past. The demon clan had used Jay to turn this place into a country of war, and in the future, this nation would certainly be destroyed. The Assassin Guild was extremely indignant upon hearing this, and Zen was about to rush in for blood, but Shifa knocked her on the head, because if others interfered, they would only hinder her. Shifa then assumed her sword stance and let him know that such a future would never happen. With those words, she rushed at her opponent and delivered two extremely fast sword strikes, cutting him into pieces. And finally, her Illy's style triumphed with the technique of the single tiger claw to the chin. After long days of being tortured by Wizar, Jay's hair had turned white. Jay's spirit was no longer there, so he had accepted his fate. But before dying, Jay warned Wizar that he would not achieve his purpose, and moreover, someone would definitely defeat him in the future. Hearing this, Wizar was very curious about who that person was, but when he asked, Jay didn't say, so he finished Jay by merging into his body. When he possessed Jay's body, Wizar always saw memories of his teammates, but he didn't care about that because just possessing the teleportation ability was enough. And from then on, the demon clan had planned to wage war throughout the country. After taking the demon's life, Shifa showed her reverence to the person whose body had been stolen, because she knew that when alive, he must have been an excellent swordsman. Not only Shifa but everyone around showed regret for him, and they believed that when liberated from the demon, he must be very happy now. At this moment, steam rose from the lake, startling everyone, not understanding what was happening. It turned out that Lloyd and Wizar had come here to fight, and the technique just now was the hellfire that Lloyd used to attack his opponent. Previously, Lloyd had continuously flown around the lake to dodge the demon spears from Wizar. At the same time, while flying, Lloyd was always thinking of ways to counter his attacks. Lloyd saw that his demon spears had many variations, but their effects were identical. Whenever they approached Lloyd, the demon spears could only break through a few layers of the barrier before losing effect. But Wizar could turn the demon spears into incantations to attack Lloyd, forcing him out of the barrier. Not to mention, his most annoying technique was Shadow Wolf, which could teleport demon spears to surprise attack Lloyd. So Lloyd had to continuously move at high speed because if hit by one spear, he would die immediately. Currently, Wizar was just standing in one place, attacking from a distance until Lloyd was exhausted, which made Lloyd very uncomfortable, so he switched to the offensive. First, Lloyd dual chanted to combine two fire element techniques. Then Lloyd created a giant fire monster that punched toward Wizar. Of course, he easily dodged it with his instantaneous teleportation ability. So the fire monster punched straight into the lake, causing steam to rise around, blocking visibility. To determine Wizar's position, Lloyd switched to sensing through Kai, but his teleportation speed was extremely fast, so Lloyd couldn't catch up. Meanwhile, Grima kept reminding Lloyd to move, or he would be hit by Wizar's Shadow Wolf. Indeed, the Shadow Wolf technique was so annoying that Lloyd couldn't stand still in one place. But Lloyd suddenly realized that earlier when he stood still in the steam, Wizar didn't use Shadow Wolf. This was a detail that helped Lloyd deduce how he used his techniques. After connecting the events, Lloyd realized that only when Wizar saw the target within his eyesight could he use Shadow Wolf to attack. Therefore, this steam curtain would help Lloyd hide to avoid his eyesight. However, Lloyd had to get close to be able to use a sword to attack him. So he approached Wizar and created many clay clones so he couldn't determine which was real. All the clones simultaneously wielded swords and rushed at Wizar to skewer him, including one clone using a real sword. So Wizar killed it, thinking it was Lloyd, and the wounds caused by the clones were quickly healed by Wizar. At this point, Wizar proudly believed that he had guessed all of Lloyd's attack options, so no matter how he stabbed, demons like him would be reborn from the beginning. But Wizar was startled to realize that Lloyd's cute clones from earlier still hadn't disappeared, and what he had just killed was also just a clone. It turned out that Lloyd had given the real sword to a clone to use, so now he had no idea where Lloyd was hiding. After some deduction, he thought Lloyd was in the sky observing. But in fact, Lloyd was standing right behind Wizar, so he took the full brunt of his flames. Then Lloyd continued to shuffle the clones randomly so he couldn't locate him. And Lloyd was very happy that his plan was so simple yet caused him such difficulty. Although Wizar could recover quickly, he was now in a difficult position, because he was surrounded by clones and didn't know which one was real. Wizar decided to create thousands of demon spears to destroy all the clones at once, and when he saw a boy using a barrier, Wizar immediately rushed over, thinking it was Lloyd. But then Wizar was disappointed when what he had just killed was just a pile of rubble. It turned out that Lloyd also used barriers to protect his clones to mislead him. Now Wizar was completely disoriented, only knowing to attack the clones, which made him feel very excited because it had been a long time since he had encountered such an annoying opponent. At this moment, Lloyd was circling behind him without using a defensive barrier. So Grima was very worried, fearing that Lloyd would be hit by a spear and die. Previously, Lloyd had created a very special sword called the Magic Absorption Sword, because it could absorb the opponent's magic, helping Lloyd analyze their abilities. Even Grima didn't expect Lloyd to be able to create something so interesting. And now Lloyd was using this sword to absorb Wizar's Shadow Wolf magic. Every time he used the Shadow Wolf spell, it was cut by Lloyd and completely absorbed. Then Lloyd used invisibility to have time to research and analyze Wizar's Shadow Wolf spell. Lloyd's recklessness made Grima even more frightened, and it had to admit that Lloyd was a foolish boy willing to risk his life just to research magic. While Lloyd was analyzing Shadow Wolf, he had touched Jay's consciousness. He hoped that Jay could speak up because his teammates were waiting for him outside. But no matter how much Lloyd called, Jay didn't respond. But in return, he had helped Lloyd understand how to use the teleportation technique and the Shadow Wolf move. Right after that, Lloyd dismissed the clone spell and revealed himself to face him. And when Wizar saw Lloyd slightly injured on the face, he boasted loudly that from the beginning, Lloyd had no chance to fight against him. So why did Lloyd have to struggle to protect those inferior assassins? Now he just needed to cooperate with Wizar, and they could rule the world together. But Lloyd just sighed, considering Wizar a fool. Demons like him might have been very strong from birth, but humans were very weak. so they needed to accumulate more experience. Everyone had to try their best to achieve their dreams, and Lloyd also had a dream of researching magic, so he wasn't free to play with him. Hearing this, Wizar used Shadow Wolf to attack Lloyd, but he punched him right when he used teleportation. And all his punches were Kai, so whoever was hit would feel very painful. It was the first time hearing of Kai, so Wizar didn't know what power it was. He also didn't understand how Lloyd could know his teleportation points. Meanwhile, Lloyd was waiting to see what technique he would display next, because in reality, all his techniques were borrowed from others. Wizar thought Lloyd just got lucky a little bit and was already showing off, but Lloyd reminded him of Jay's words before he died, that he would surely be defeated in the future. Hearing this, Wizar was very upset and continued to use teleportation, but was hit by a kick from Lloyd. Not stopping there, Lloyd continuously rushed in to beat Wizar, making him just take the hits. And no matter where Wizar teleported, Lloyd always appeared in front, giving him a kick to the mouth. Although demon bodies could recover, if beaten so much, Wizar had to cry out in pain. Not to mention, wherever he teleported, he would be hit by a kick from Lloyd. At this point, Lloyd had used dual chanting to create an extremely strong fire technique. Because Wizar couldn't dodge this technique, he was blown by Lloyd into a pool of lava. Wizar understood that if he fell down, he would burn to ashes. But when he used teleportation, Lloyd appeared again and kicked him into the sky. In a moment, Lloyd remembered his previous life up to this one. For a very long time, Lloyd had always wondered who had created the magic books. Perhaps it was a very kind person that Lloyd had not had the opportunity to chat with. So Lloyd really wanted to meet Jay to talk to him once, while Wizar was being beaten to a pulp by Lloyd, and he couldn't fight back. Now Lloyd was no longer in a good mood, so he would eliminate him immediately. Hearing this, Wizar was very angry, so he performed his strongest secret technique. Wizar said that demons could freely control the magical power in the air and compress it, and then he created a black death ball that could turn everything into nothingness. Although Wizar had struggled to create the technique and throw it down heavily, Lloyd only needed to wave his hand once, and the ball dissipated into nothingness, just like its name. And Wizar was extremely confused when his technique suddenly evaporated, and it turned out that Lloyd had created another black death ball to neutralize his ball. So Wizar was frustrated, claiming that his technique couldn't be used freely by others so easily. However, Wizar didn't know that Lloyd had researched a lot about space element magic. So Lloyd knew that the black death ball was just a technique to vaporize a certain area of space. When Lloyd first learned about this technique, he had used it to play around, accidentally blowing away several mountains. Lloyd even felt that playing wasn't satisfying enough, so he created dozens of balls and arranged them together to experiment. Hearing this, Wizar was left speechless because he had to spend a lot of magical power to create this technique. Lloyd let him know that when the balls touched each other, they would automatically neutralize, and at that time, Lloyd also felt very surprised, just like Wizar now. Hearing this, Wizar was very upset, claiming that Lloyd was just a stinky bug who only boasted, and there was no way that the pinnacle technique of demons would dissipate in such a silly way. Seeing this guy talk too much, Lloyd was also annoyed to the point of spitting his nose. Because he didn't believe in Lloyd's power, he suddenly approached him, but when he felt Lloyd's magical power, Wizar was scared out of his pants. Lloyd even created a bunch of black death balls, leaving him speechless. No matter where he teleported, the balls would always follow him without leaving a step. Below, the demon clan was being blinded by the bone curtain, so Shifa and everyone else were cutting down each one together. As for Zen, she used her poisoning ability, so she warned everyone not to come close, but Shifa thought Zen just wanted to show off to others. At this moment, Amber suddenly realized that it was morning, but the sun hadn't appeared. Clearly, the clock had struck 6 am, but the sky was still pitch black. It turned out that the surrounding space was being affected by Lloyd's technique. He had created a black death ball and sucked Wizar into that ball, so he was struggling to escape because if he was caught by this, he would not be able to recover. To save his life, he decided to abandon Jay's body, but Jay's body had stiffened, causing him to be completely stuck. With no other way, he had to pretend to be Jay to beg Lloyd for forgiveness, and Wizar even begged Jay's teammates to do something to save him. But Lloyd coldly created a second ball, crushing the demon flat, and when the two balls collided, they neutralized each other and evaporated immediately. After the sky brightened again, Jay also appeared to send his thanks to Lloyd. Then he gradually disappeared with a radiant smile. Below, everyone was very surprised to see the sun bright again, and Zen still managed to see Jay, so she suddenly remembered his past. Jay had said that the 7th prince was the strongest person in this kingdom, because on the day he was born, the king's castle had a brilliant fireworks display. But rumor had it that it was the 7th prince's magic that had punctured a huge hole in the palace. Jay believed that a child with such strong magic would surely remove the curse from the group. So everyone promised that if that story was true, they would serve the 7th prince for life. And now Zen was very happy that everything Jay had said back then was true. It's just that Jay was no longer alive, so Lloyd and Grima had created a grave for him. But this was just a formal grave because Jay's body had been swallowed by the void. During the battle with Wizar, Lloyd had decoded the Shadow Wolf technique. Everywhere he teleported was easily predicted by Lloyd, so when Lloyd created the void ball, he couldn't escape anymore. But anyway, Lloyd had to admit that he was a very strong demon. The nature of the Shadow Wolf technique was arranged in a very neat and understandable way. And before he died, Jay had completed this technique as well as how to counter it. Jay had entrusted it to Lloyd. So this was his victory, not Lloyd's. Over here, Zen had heard all of Lloyd's confessions, so she felt very moved. And when she saw Lloyd alone, Zen wanted to come to thank him and express her wishes to him. But Prince Amber had reached Lloyd first to have a few words with him. Amber said that he had heard everything about Jay and the whole story, but in fact, those people just made up stories so Amber wouldn't know about Lloyd's true power. Amber also acknowledged that Lloyd was a kind person for helping the Assassin Guild wholeheartedly. But the Assassin Guild had always lurked in the shadows, causing many evil deeds. Not to mention, they had kidnapped Lloyd, so Amber couldn't forgive them. To atone for their mistakes, they had asked Amber's permission to serve Lloyd for life, proving that they knew how to reform. So now Amber asked for Lloyd's opinion, because if Lloyd accepted the Assassin Guild, he would have to be responsible to not let them defile the royal family's reputation. Lloyd saw that Amber's words were very correct, so he would talk to them privately. And Lloyd promised that if they committed crimes again, he would take full responsibility. Before Lloyd's credibility, everyone was very amazed. But in fact, Amber never wanted to make things difficult for Lloyd. Because of the royal family's formalities, he always cared about Lloyd. So if he had any difficulties, he should say them all, because anyway, Lloyd was the brother Amber cherished the most. At this moment, Tuan rushed over, thinking Lloyd was in danger. But everyone looked at Tuan like a strange creature because when she arrived, the party was already over. Feeling too embarrassed, Tuan ran straight back, but Shifa caught Tuan, not letting the girl run around anymore. Lloyd also felt that the Assassin Guild had a lot of magical potential. Moreover, their leader was also very kind, so Lloyd had to help those people, and the Assassin Guild was also forgiven, so they had to find a way to repay Lloyd. Everyone then organized a small party near Jay's grave, and when dining with the princes of the kingdom, others felt very pressured. So Amber told everyone to enjoy freely without hesitation. Hearing this, Tuan immediately took the opportunity to pick a fight with Shifa, while Amber brought a bottle of wine to invite the Assassin Guild to raise their glasses. At first, the guild was shy when invited to drink by the second prince himself, but when they were drunk, everyone shouted like they were family. Tuan even went to hug Jay's grave, crying and such, thinking he was a handsome, ill-fated boy. Amber found this party very enjoyable, so he wanted to host one at the palace once. As for Teria, when she was drunk, she began to approach the prince, but he was very sober, so he refused. So Teria used her ability to share damage to make the prince drunk like her, thinking that when drunk, the prince would reveal his bestial nature. But Amber was still upset about Lloyd's underwear incident, so he looked for Gali to settle the score. After Lloyd's battle ended, a hot spring had been created right in the mansion. And when bathing here, everyone praised it as awesome beyond escape. Here, Zen had asked Shifa's permission to serve Lloyd to repay him. Coincidentally, Lloyd was also there, so he immediately agreed. However, Zen still felt self-conscious because the poison on her body affected others, so Lloyd advised Zen to focus on researching poison to become a doctor. That was what Lloyd wanted to see. Hearing this, Zen was very touched, because before, she was often shunned by people because of the curse on her body. But now Lloyd had accepted Zen, so she promised that she would try her best to meet his expectations. From that day on, life in the capital of Solium didn't change much. But Zen had now become a maid inside the palace, and she was learning from Shefa how to become a proper maid, so that in the future, she could take care of Lloyd perfectly. Meanwhile, Prince Amber was reporting everything in Lordos to the king. At the same time, he also concealed the fact that Lloyd had been kidnapped, so the king didn't question much about this matter. After everything was over, Lloyd and Greimer returned to the library beneath the castle. This place still contained many magic books that Lloyd had never read before, so every day, Lloyd came here to satisfy his passion for researching magic.